Hey, everybody. Instead of our regular news roundup, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to round up our travels from Music Biz and Mo Forum. Dmitri traveled to both over the last 2 weeks. Really excited to hear your takes, Dmitri. What did you pick up on in Music Biz?
Oh, Jade, Music Biz was a blast. It was in Atlanta again, and it's funny, Jade, because I did a couple of panels and fireside chats and things like that. But I find that like every once in a while, everything I learn about the music industry, like at that moment, is actually happening in the lobby, which is funny. It's like the individual conversations you have, and this is kind of ironic because the first thing I want to share is something that I said rather than somebody else said, but it was, it's like the opposite of what we just said. But, I did a fireside chat with Blanco Brown, the artist who blew up in 2019 when he did the Get Up, which became this viral TikTok dance and song. And he, in the interview that I did with him on stage, he said that his response to the Breaking Rust fiasco, which is where he felt like an AI artist had basically trained on his voice and style without his permission and put out a song that everybody said, this sounds like you. And then he went and we've talked about this on the podcast before, but he went and did a cover song of the AI song, Walk the Walk. No, that's not what it's called. It's the Breaking Rust song, Walk My Walk. Now I can't even remember the name of the song. Anyway, at the end of that conversation, towards the end, he said that his response to stopping that kind of stuff in the future was that he was going to trademark his voice, which is exactly what Taylor Swift has said, publicly said that she's going to do too. So it'll be interesting to see if that's a thing you can do, because if two people's voices sound similar, it's very hard to trademark voices. But as he was talking about it, I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about what is it that's actually happening in the market when people use somebody else's voice and style to create new music? And I came up with this term, style laundering. So it's like when AI like is using somebody else's style, not giving them credit, not attributing it. It's usually the voice that's really in the mix. That's what they're doing. They're laundering the style. You're pushing the training data through a generative AI platform that hasn't been licensed, like Suno, and all of a sudden, it's my style.
Totally. And I've gone back and forth on how I really feel about this whole concept, AI, generative music, and all that. And what I've kind of landed on now is that like a human being influenced by another human, going to see a drummer at a jazz club and being like, I want to play like that, and emulating their style and talking about that in interviews is one thing. When it's a tech company that's doing that at scale, it changes the whole conversation, and it makes it a lot more necessary to kind of like create guardrails for that kind of thing, so that artists can get paid.
Yeah, there's been a whole conversation about, what about the AI creators? This is creating access for them to create music for the first time. Don't they deserve to be creative too? Do you have to have training? Do you have to have access to resources, etc., studios, musical instruments, lessons, whatever, in order to become creative? Obviously not. But the real issue is, what are you starting with? Where does it, what does it start with? And whose creativity are you starting with? And are you getting permission, giving permission, licensing, paying, etc.? So, but voice actually popped up a lot more in my conversations. I was, again, in the lobby with Michael Polchinski, who has been on the podcast in the past. He's with Voice Swap now, which is a company that is doing ethical voice AI generation, where you can actually license your voice and then resell the use of your voice, or you can use somebody else's voice ethically. And I was just thinking about what I talked about with Mike was, imagine artists making their own voice clones and giving it a commercial application, which Voice Swap is already doing. But so that's what it is. It's like, for X amount of dollars, you can license my voice for a song, right? And then I wondered, is there some legal way to use that, similar to how Blanco Brown and Taylor Swift are talking about trademarking their voice? If there's a commercial application for your voice as AI, and then somebody else uses some other method to recreate the sound of your voice, could you somehow use that as a legal precedent to say, wait a second, I've either trademarked this AI. I don't know if you could patent AI of a single voice. I don't know if that's I talked to some lawyers. They said it's probably not a patent, but whatever it is, some way to sort of say, this is the voice, this is the AI voice that I say can be used, and I charge for it. That way, when somebody else does something else with your voice without permission, you kind of have like that legal reference point. So I thought that was kind of a fun conversation with Mike Pelchinski.
it sounds like a way forward for sure. Maybe, at least to start with, like, let's see, we got to start somewhere, and that seems like a great place to start.
Yeah. I have two more things that I picked up in the lobby. I'm sorry, Jade. It's all related to AI. I don't know why. It's on everybody's topics. Not that we're trying to talk about AI all the time, but I think we really are at a pivotal moment. And when we get to talking about the MoForum event that I attended in New York just a couple days ago, there's some other really interesting AI stuff, though. But here is a zinger that came from Andrea Gleason, the former CEO of TuneCore. She was like, I've been wanting to tell the folks at Udio, you should just buy Tidal.
Mm.
So the idea there is the licenses that are coming through are talking about having a walled garden, meaning when you make a song using generative AI, you can't put it on the streaming services. You can't necessarily put it on social media. It's just within, say, Udio, where you've licensed to mess around with a song, and then inside Udio, you can play it for other people. So
Stream it, send the links
yeah,
and stuff. Yeah.
so it keeps it from being commercialized, being deep faked, etc., like that. But her idea of taking a streaming service that is a kind of a respected streaming service, but isn't it's not as big as Spotify or Apple. And then saying, well, what if Udio owned Tidal? It's still within the walled garden, and they can then control all the attribution, the licensing, the royalties, etc. So I thought that Andrea Gleason's brilliant to think of that
Hmm.
idea.
That's a great idea. I haven't heard anyone else say that or even suggest that or even think that that could be a solution. That's kind of interesting.
I always think it's funny when amazing execs like Andrea leave a company and then they can say a lot more, a lot more stuff in the lobby of music biz. But please, if you repeat that, credit it to her. It was her idea, not mine. Now, I do have an anonymous one that
Mm.
I came up with. Um, Somebody pointed out to me that if a generative AI song company would limit the number of reference songs for the style or the attribution that's being made, it just becomes a lot easier to address the issue of attribution. There's all these solutions that are emerging right now about how do you do attribution after the fact? Like if nothing's inside the licensing model, I'm sorry, in the training data model, if there's nothing inside the model that shows what the sources were of everything, when you spit it out, you kind of don't know. There's no metadata attached to it. But if you limited it to just 2 or 3 songs to say, all right, you're allowed to reference artists and we haven't even created the attribution, but you can only reference 2 or 3 artists. Then whatever comes out, you can say, okay, we can split this across those 2 or 3 artists or songwriters. It'll still probably be more than 2 or 3, even if somebody says, hey, I want to do a mix of whatever, Toots and the Maytals and Fortet. Like you wouldn't necessarily, there might be lots of songwriters, there might be producers that get credits. So by the time you add it, or if obviously hip hop and R&B, a lot of those genres have multiple songwriters, producers that are getting credits. All of a sudden, it'd still be 25 people, artists that have to somehow get attributed. But if you just do 2 or 3 songs, it's way easier than if you did like 20 songs and then that turns into 20 more songs. And then all of a sudden you have like 1,000 influences. You'd never get the royalties paid back to the creator. So I just thought that was a click for me of like, oh, limit it to 2 or 3 reference songs. And then attribution just becomes so much simpler.
Definitely. I mean, everyone, yeah, people are trying to solve this at scale, but like, I feel like we need a strong starting place to kind of build some precedent around this
Yeah.
stuff. I mentioned before, like I've kind of flip flopped on like how I feel about it. My current feelings around it are, when Suno first launched, I was like messing around with it, and I'm like, this is cool, this is awesome. Now I kind of can't stand it. I'm like, okay, it evolved so quickly, and then it kind of stagnated in like what it can do, like in terms of like the commercial generative stuff. And now I'm back to playing my drum set like all the time. I'm like, hey, I can't do this. So I think that this, I think it's going to these kind of technologies, just like social media did, like it forces artists to evolve. Artists are always evolving and reacting to what's happening in the world politically, what's happening, like all this kind of stuff. So I kind of think it's I don't know, like obviously hindsight's 2020, but I think we might look back at this time and think, oh, it's funny that we were all worried about that stuff like at that time. That's kind of where my head's at now.
Wow, that's really relevant to the event that I went to at Mo Forum last week in New York. Mo Forum, so it's not a lot of people don't know about it because it's an invitation only event. That the law firm Morrison Forster puts on. They've been a partner with Music Tectonics last year. They're coming in this year at Music Tectonics as well, sponsoring our first ever VIP house called Mofo House, which is really exciting. And I got a real taste of their network and what they're going to bring to Tectonics this year, because they brought in major catalog companies, people investing in big catalogs, major DSPs, and also really major labels, and really interesting people that are kind of on the front line of some of the scale up and larger tech platform companies that are bringing a lot of interesting things in innovation. There were I don't know if we have time to talk about all of them, Jade, but there were four. There were like 2 days of sessions, but there were 4 sessions that I had some kind of takeaways with. I was really excited to see the one that featured these large catalog companies like Apollo, Chord Music, Primary Wave. Duetti was also on that panel. And just hearing all of those folks talk together. I mean, if you don't know the first 3, Apollo, Chord, Primary Wave, some people refer to them as publishers, but in a lot of ways, they own the publishing rights. Some of them buy recording rights as well. They're like the larger investors. They're putting billions of dollars into song catalogs and then figuring out, how to make those investments work. But by hearing them talk about it and the size of the catalogs, even thinking about the fact that Apollo has deployed like $5 billion in songs, it really gives you a sense that this is a mature institutional asset class. It's a different way of thinking than record labels. It's a different way of thinking than record labels because instead of thinking about hits, they're thinking about the longevity of a catalog as an asset much longer. Labels traditionally were looking for those big hits, and then over time they'd build up a catalog. Their money came in those big booms of hits, though, a lot of times. But these companies aren't even trying to do that necessarily. Really, they're looking at the longevity of a fan. And so it was really interesting to hear them talk about it and think about, as we're talking at Music Tectonics about growing the value of music, these are the guys who are really thinking about, they're investing so much money into it that they really want to see the growth there as well. Again, I don't know if I have time to talk about it, all of this. I was excited to see Remington Scott from Hyperreal did a presentation. He's like a computer generated animation guy from Hollywood. Worked on Spider-Man 2 and all sorts of other famous animated films. But now this company Hyperreal that he's working with is working with a lot of music, but other celebrities to do a form of motion capture that really allows you to get very realistic avatars and holograms. And he just did a great presentation. I think what was nice for me is so much happened in the kind of like the VR space and for a little while in the gaming and the holograms that looked like, okay, it did its thing. It didn't really take off. But really what's happening is the technology is getting better. We just, as people on Music Tectonics have heard, the $300 million sale of Kiss, the Kiss catalog didn't just include the songs, but it bundled in name, image, and likeness and biometric data. And that was kind of and actually Morrison Forster was part of that deal. They negotiated on behalf of Kiss, the band.
That's cool.
Just looking at that catalog conversation right next to this kind of like hologram virtual performer conversation made me think a real shift is happening. Jade, like those traditionally they're saying, okay, I can see where those song catalog companies can say, I can see where the streaming's going. It's got a long life to it. I'll invest at that. I'll have a consistent amount coming. But if you think about a company that like Pop House, which bought Kiss catalog, not only do they get the live performances, right? So now, I mean, they're not live, they're holograms, but it's the same people that did the ABBA Voyage thing. They actually now are getting, as song rights owners, they're getting the ticket sales for all those virtual performances. So that could theoretically double the value of those catalogs if you get name, image, and likeness. And nobody's talked about this, but what if Avatar Kiss or Hologram Kiss or whatever gets to write future songs, AI-generated songs that are solely trained on the Kiss catalog, and there'll be songs that get released 10 years from now, 20 years, 100 years from now, the people who own the rights to those songs, all of a sudden they have a whole other revenue stream. So I don't know. That's some of the stuff I heard at Mo Forum.
That's awesome. And I think the longevity of the fan is a really interesting part of that too. Like for me, it's like, I want to play drums in Kiss and do that in VR. And maybe that's something I can do as a fan, right?
Oh yeah.
All that kind of cool stuff. Like
Oh,
you know.
that's even. I love that, Jade. That's. I didn't even think. I didn't put that into the mix. But you're right. Like when we're looking at this interactive, and we've just seen some announcements with Spotify licensing the ability to remix songs with Universal, and yeah, it's that interactive thing. That's a whole. It's a whole other thing, right? It feels like it's no longer like a Guitar Hero where you're pretending to play music, but
Right.
you're actually playing music with the band.
Yep. Could
I,
be. Could be really cool.
I love that,
Well,
Jade.
well, great hearing your takeaways, Dimitri. This was awesome to have this conversation with you, and
Thanks, Jade.
thanks, Dimitri.